appreciate you coming tonight to hear a little bit more about the referendum that is on the ballot for November 5th. So we're going to provide a little bit of background information, and then we're going to leave an opportunity for questions and answers at the end. David C. is our Director of Business Services, so we'll be doing this together, but I'll start. Sound good? All right, so I'm going to jump right in. I do want to start with a short video. Before I do that, I do want to say, as an educator and as a parent here in the Superior School District, this is my 7th year in the Superior School District as a superintendent. I'm incredibly proud of what we've accomplished so far in our school district. In the last 6 years, we have moved from 1 school exceeding on our state report card to now we have 4 of our 7 schools exceeding on our school report card. We now are above the state average in schools graduating from Superior High School. I'm continued to be so proud of the opportunities that our kids have here in any of our schools in the Superior School District. There's a wide variety of programs, sports, extracurricular activities that our kids can take part in regardless of what their interests are. And our students really have an opportunity to tap into any of those things that they love to do. We also have really strong relationships within our schools. We have small class size ratios where our teachers are able to build those strong school classroom relationships. We also have amazing staff and principals in each of our buildings. And so I'm just really proud. I have a short video, it's only 3 minutes, but it kind of highlights what I just shared. I do want to start off with that quick video.
Here in the School District of Superior, we have much to be proud of. A wide variety of opportunities to ensure all students are college, career, and life ready, countless community partnerships, and a focus on the whole child where we build strong relationships to promote overall student well-being.
Being a Spartan, you're a big family, so relying on the other people, that helps a lot. A Spartan is someone that shows grit and determination in every facet of their life.
School district is special. It's where I went, it's where I grew up, and I loved going to school here. And now to be able to work here in that district, in a school I went to, and actually work alongside teachers that I had when I went to this school, that's really special.
Small class sizes are something we've taken great pride in Superior, and they really do help those kids get more individual attention. Relationships are essential because raising these kids is a team effort. Those relationships with parents, when we're able to sit down with them and kind of explain to them if they do these small things at home, that'll help us a lot at school and keep those kids going as far as they possibly can.
And how transparent the school district is. These guys, they let parents know what they're going to be talking about.
There's everyone through Spartan Manufacturing, we're into more woodworking stuff, and then there's the art department, photography.
Miss Doobie and Miss Kalen all offer business classes.
Spartan Spend if you're into journalism, foods classes, there's life skills.
And I have to give a special shout out because I've been to many plays and they are tremendous. And we also know they've got a pretty neat set of sports teams that have some great rivalries.
Being part of the PTA and volunteering has allowed me an opportunity to work alongside with different people in our community, and it's really great to see how everyone here in Superior comes together for our kids.
We partner directly with the school on classes that we know are directly transferable to the university, and what it does is, I think, accelerate a student's career path, plus save some money.
It is a great benefit to have the high school so close to our campus here. We have several transcript and credit courses, and those are courses that the Superior High School teachers teach that are actually our courses.
There's so much to be proud of in the School District of Superior. We are so proud of the important community partnerships that support our students, a wide range of sports and activities available to all of our students that tap into any interests, small class sizes where strong relationships are established, and we have amazing teachers, staff, and principals in all of our schools that support our kids. Superior is a great place to learn, a great place to work, and a great place to succeed. We are Superior. We are Spartans.
All right, I share that video just because it's a nice summary of what I think we're most proud of in our school district and kind of sets the tone for our conversation here tonight. So the reason we're here tonight is because on November 5th, our community will be asked a question on the ballot about whether they want to invest in the Superior School District for 5 school years. Ultimately, what brings us here today is this is my 7th year. In the 7 years that I've been here, we have been reducing our expenses every year. Last year was our greatest challenge, where we had to close a elementary school and we had to eliminate 60 staff positions last year alone. Part of that has to do with some of the state funding that Dave's going to talk about. But the other piece of that is we received federal ESSER dollars during those years. And during those years, we were really limited in the amount of reductions we could make at a state level. So as our expenses went up, our revenues didn't increase. And so at the state level, not only did it not increase, it stayed flat. And so obviously after the pandemic is when we saw some of the greatest inflationary costs. And so last year we had to make some significant reductions because we no longer had access to those federal dollars and we hadn't received an increase in our revenue. David will talk about the projected forecast when we look at what that deficit looks like in the future. Ultimately, the question being asked of our community at this point is, do you want us to continue making these reductions? So we've been making these reductions, like I said, for the last 7 years. We've got former board members in the room. Even before I was here, we were making reductions on an annual basis and reducing our expenses. And so the question is, do we really want to continue to make those deep level cuts at this point? Or do we want to turn to our taxpayers and ask if they want to support our annual operating budget? And we'll talk a little bit about the history around that too. Maybe. Okay, so one of the first questions folks ask is, haven't we just done this? Didn't we just go to a referendum? And we did. In 2016, the Superior School District asked taxpayers about a capital referendum, and that was passed in 2016. That was specific to the remodel or the replacement of Cooper Elementary School and the remodel of the Superior High School, as well as other facility improvements that needed to happen across all of our other schools. Those dollars can't be used for things like salaries or operational costs. They're purely used for those capital investments that we made back then. And so what we're asking about this time around is what's called an operational referendum. An operational referendum is what school districts refer to as supporting those annual operational expenses like salaries, utilities, buses, and those kinds of things. So this is different than what was asked of in 2016.
I just want to jump in. One thing that I've heard a lot of people say is, why don't you just use that referendum, that capital referendum money to pay for their expenses? Well, a capital referendum is a simple mortgage. So we got $90 million loaned to us. Then we paid the construction company to build the schools. And now we're just making those payments. That's what those yearly payments are. So there isn't a pile of $90 million that's over here that we could use. That money's already been spent. If that money was left over, you would have to give that back to the community. You cannot use capital referendum money for anything other than what was outlined in that referendum itself.
So these are, I think, a couple critical points and why we're looking at an operational referendum. Even before the pandemic, as I said before, we were making reductions every year to have a balanced budget. Last year, we had to close a school and we had to make significant staff reductions. Due to the lack of state funding that hasn't kept up with our inflationary costs, we're projecting a $2 million deficit next year. And the forecast in the future years 3, 4, and 5 from now is even more grim. One of the questions that I was asked is, why is the proposed referendum more expensive in years 3, 4, or 5? It feels like you're trying to trick us with a lower amount in the first years and then increase those costs in years 3, 4, and 5. The reason that those look more in years 3 and 4 and 5 is because the deficit that we're projecting is going to be higher. And David will share that here in a minute. But I think that's just an important point that I wanted to make sure people understand. I think number 4, this fourth bullet is really important. This is not a unique situation to the Superior School District. 85% of the school districts in the state of Wisconsin have had to go to their local communities asking for an operational referendum to keep up with the operational costs, because the money that we are getting at the state level is not keeping up with the costs that we are incurring. Our health insurance is going up. All of our expenses are going up, and yet our state revenue is going down. Also, I think an important factor, and I think I have it on the next slide here, when we surveyed, one of the first steps before you go to referendum is you want to go out to your community and find out what do they feel about this as a possible step. 63.3% of our community, when we surveyed them last summer, said they would support some version of a referendum for this purpose. We provided 3 different options in that survey: the most expensive, a medium, and the least expensive referendum. And overwhelming people supported the least expensive referendum. And so when our school board met in August, they wanted to honor the voice of that survey and of our community. And so that is why the amount that we have on the referendum is indicated the way it is, because that was the feedback that we got on the survey And at the time, 63.3% of our community was in favor of moving forward with an operational referendum. Ultimately, I think an important data point, as well as we're talking about revenue, is our student enrollment. So we're also losing student enrollment over the last years, which is one of the reasons why we had to close one of our elementary schools. We've lost 500 elementary students in the last 5 years since, and particularly after the pandemic. We are seeing our graduating classes of about 310 students, but our incoming kindergarten is 240. And that has been a trend for about 3 or 4 years, where every year we're losing 70, 75 students, and that really adds up over a 5-year period of time. I believe this graph. So you can see this again is not unique to Superior. 71% of the school districts are seeing declining enrollment. This graph here on the right shows that the darker blue or black areas are where they're seeing the highest declining enrollment and the lowest birth rate. So we're seeing less kids coming into kindergarten and higher grade levels are graduating, which is also having an impact on our overall revenue. This is David's slide.
As Amy said, I'm David C. I'm the Director of Business Services for the Superior School District. First, I have to apologize. Amy's a really good speaker. I am not a really good speaker. So what this referendum comes down to on November 5th is it's a question to the community. Regardless of what happens, somebody's going to pay. This question is asking, are our taxpayers going to pay a little bit more on their property taxes, or are children going to pay the price within the classroom? By price, I mean less opportunities. What it comes down to is I have 2 kids that are in the district. I can't put a value on what my kids are worth. They're limitless. The state does put a value on our kids. Each one of our kids are worth a certain amount of money per the state. So a basic of how school finance works is, how many kids do you have? How much does the state say they're worth? Multiply those 2 numbers together, and that's the amount of money you get. That's the basic 101 on school revenue. So what are those variables involved? Amy touched on declining enrollment. We are losing kids. We are graduating 60 to 70 more kids than we're getting in the kindergarten class. We're not losing kids because of an open enrollment. We're not losing any kids for any other reason other than people aren't having kids. One thing somebody told me one time is, do you notice when you see somebody that's pregnant? It's like a thing now. Before, you'd see pregnant people all the time. Now it's like people just aren't having kids. So that's where the declining enrollment is coming from. Now this slide frustrates me. What this says is back in 2009, up until that time, the state coupled school revenue with CPI, with inflation. So if inflation went up 3%, schools got an additional 3% in revenue. Starting in 2009, they decoupled that. Said, we are not going to do that anymore. We're going to decide what we're going to give you for an increase in revenue to schools. 2012 came in and they cut public education budgets significantly. And since that point in time, they have not made that ground back up. If in 2009, they didn't decouple revenue from inflation, they just kept it so that as expenses go up 2%, your utilities, salaries go up 2%, revenue goes up 2%, we would have an additional $3,380 per student. If we had that, we are not going to operational referendum, and I'm at home cooking my kids' dinner, okay? But the state decided that that's the way they're gonna do it, while at the same time increasing the funding they're giving to private education and voucher schools. So the next slide, that one made me frustrated. This one just makes me angry. This is when I look at it, you come in and like I said, the state decides, hey, how much value do the students in Superior have? The students in Superior have a value of $11,244. The state average, $12,506. Now I think my kid's worth just as much as a Madison kid, a Milwaukee kid, a Bayfield kid who gets $16,456. But because of that, and this is all rooted in something that happened in 1993. School finance is built on a system that's called revenue caps and revenue limits. It was a temporary measure in 1993 that was supposed to be for 3 years and is now here for 3 decades. That's what's keeping a ceiling on the revenue, making it so it's required that you can get more revenue as a school district, but the only way to do that is to go out to your community and get a referendum passed and have it be paid for by property tax side of it. When I created this chart, we happened to be playing River Falls, our football team was, so I kind of pulled them in Drummond, and then I was like, why are they below us? And that's when I found out, well, Drummond and River Falls went to an operational referendum in April and passed. So right now we're ranked 369th out of 421 school districts in the state of Wisconsin. At the very least, we're at 371 because Drummond and River Falls are both leapfrog. So what this comes down to is if the operational referendum passes, that still will only get us to about 11,700. We are still going to be significantly below the state average, but at least it's going to give us the opportunity to keep the programs we have here in place, to keep the opportunities we have here in place.
Can you talk a little bit about why the numbers are different based on where they were at in 1993?
So what happened in 1993 when they created school finance? The state decided that up until that time, school districts could just tax as much as they wanted to. So they can go out to the community and just tax. So they decided, hey, we're going to put a limit on this. And the way they decided to do those limits is, how much did you guys spend on a kid last year? Well, then Superior was very fiscally responsible. Superior has a history of being fiscally responsible. That's why we're one of the 15% that haven't gone to operational referendum yet. Superior did not spend a lot on kids. They were good stewards of taxpayers' money, a lot of money. But other districts either one spent a lot of money or had a really smart business manager that heard them say, hey, if we spend a lot now, we'll get more money next year. And they had business managers that would just plow expenses into their budget. They would spend money hand over fist. And what happened after that? They got more money. So a school district that spent an incredible, say Superior spent $5,000 a kid, the state says, you guys get $5,000 a kid. Let's say another neighboring school district spent $8,000 a kid. The state came in and said, going forward, you guys get $8,000 a kid. Because of that, we never catch up. So as they increase, hey, everybody gets $325. Well, that district that was getting $8,000 a kid got $325. Us, who was getting $5,000 a kid, got $325. You never catch up to those kids. And we've been living that ever since. So unless the community goes out to the taxpayers and gets an operational referendum, the only way to close that number up is by doing that.
So that was a question somebody asked at a previous community session. Why are those numbers different? And it's really twofold. One is based on what they were spending in 1993 and if they've gone to an operational referendum. So for example, Hudson has gone through multiple operational referendums and had them passed in their community, which is why they're higher than us. Others were higher in 1993.
And Hudson's going again this year. So even with what they're making there, that's not enough for them. They're going again. So they will, if that passes, again, their number will go up. Well, we're going to be down below. So this is what do we look like financially. Now, the big numbers people look at it and jump out at them is these red numbers. So this current year, 24-25, it shows a negative $8,000. When you have a $60 million budget or a $56 million budget, $8,000 is zero. That's an accounting move that I can make that will just get down to zero. So we have a balanced budget going. The next year, we're in a hole of $1.9 million. The following year, $4.5 million. Then $7 million. Till you get to in year 5, we're $9.7 million in a deficit. This year, coming into it, we were looking at a deficit of around $4.5 million. To make that money up, we had to close a school. We laid off 60 staff members. And I ended up changing everybody's health insurance to what's called a narrow network plan so we could save almost $1 million. Those easy grabs don't exist anymore. Any other cut that we do going forward is going to touch a classroom. It's going to mean less opportunities for kids. It's going to be higher class sizes, and it's going to be less programs that kids can join. Now, the thing when people looked at it, like Amy said earlier, why is it getting bigger? Well, because compounding interest. If we give a 2% raise to a teacher, which is going to be significantly below inflation, you're going to have to give another 2%. The interest builds off of that. So if you look at this, our revenues per the state actually go down. They're giving us less money, but at the same time, expenses go up. Prime example is Pure Well Light Power. I'm sure you guys heard they're looking at an 18% increase, right? That's a big increase. I was budgeting for 3, hoping for 3. 18% for a school district, ours, that has a $600,000 utility bill is $100,000. Just like that, I need to find $100,000 because that's what our utilities are going to go up as a school district. And you're seeing it across the board. Everything is going up. But at the same time, the state says we're not going to give you any more money. You need to go out to your taxpayers and you need to have them provide money. The other part I always hear is people say, you guys just haven't been fiscally responsible with your money. You just must be spending money willy-nilly. Well, if you look right here, these numbers are here, surplus and deficit. We have been running a surplus. That means we've been putting money into our fund balance. Our fund balance is our savings account. We knew this was coming. Amy knew this was coming 5 years ago. If you guys ever heard the term fiscal cliff, that's all I had heard about since I started here. If we weren't fiscally responsible, we would have a deficit these past years, but we haven't. We have consistently been putting money aside knowing this is coming. But the second you start spending into your savings account, it's just like your personal account. If you use your savings account to make your day-to-day payments, to pay your mortgage, to pay your car bill, you're not gonna be able to build that up. And when that's gone, it is gone. Our auditors recommend a fund balance of between 25 and 32%. We're gonna be at 28%. We are one of the districts with our fiscal responsibility and are in a better shape than a lot of school districts out there, because there's a lot of them that are already at this point, at the $2 million in the hole. We're going with this operational referendum so we don't need to make those drastic cuts. So we don't have to take away those opportunities for the kids. So.
One of the questions that was asked at the community or at the city council meeting was about our fund balance and if we could put more money away in our fund balance. Can you talk about why the amount that we put away each year and save, why that's not higher?
Yep. So school finance, public education finance is a convoluted, confusing system, and I think they do it on purpose. So let's say we have an extra $3 million and we want to put that in a fund balance. Sounds like a good idea, right? Let's take that money, let's cut everything we can, let's put that into savings. The state then walks up and goes, you guys didn't spend $3 million. I'm not going to give you as much aid anymore. So what happens is the taxpayers then have to give us more money because the state says you don't need as much aid. That's the other part I tell people, and this referendum is going to cost $7 per $100,000. That's how much it's going to cost, or that's the estimate of how much it's going to cost to have this referendum passed. That doesn't mean taxes aren't going to go up. Because honestly, taxes are probably going to go up no matter what. Because the state has already come and said, we're giving you less money. They're sitting on over a $3 billion surplus, while at the same time saying, we're going to give you less money. And the only way you can get money is by going to the community and asking taxpayers. We've reached out to our state senator and said, we need to know what to do. And he says, you need to go out and you need to pass a referendum. And frankly, he said, frankly, it's a good deal for our property taxpayers. So the other part of it is this referendum is only the first step. We can't just pass a referendum and just be like, yay, we passed a referendum, that's awesome. The work starts there. That lets us keep our opportunities in the district. But after that, we need people to make their voices heard and say, we demand that public education get funded, because if it doesn't, we'll just end up coming back again. If something doesn't change, we're just going to end up having to come back again. And eventually, the big fear is there's so many school districts that have over 10% of their budget tied to a referendum. What if one year they decide, we're just saying no? Second that happens, if that happens, let's say, you know, if we were district getting a referendum and they cut $5 million, we need to cut $5 million. 60 teachers, a health insurance change, the closing of a school didn't even get us to a $5 million in savings. So,
I just wanted to make the point that as you look at what we've built over our fund balance, that really has come in the reduction of staffing positions typically. School districts spend about 80% of their annual budget on staff, salaries, and benefits. And so, for example, we've tried to keep all of those reductions away from the classroom as much as possible. Class sizes did not go up, even though we closed a elementary school last year, because we used the same ratios and we were able to absorb those students within our other school district or other school buildings. And so I just want to recognize, like I think over the last several years, we've reduced about 20% of our board office staff or other positions away from the classroom for us to be able to keep things status quo. Like David said, moving forward, that isn't going to be an option.
One other question I had, the city council asked me, and I wish I would have said it there. What have you done different? Do something to, what ideas do you have that you can do different? The rebuttal on that is we have been doing that. If we hadn't been doing that, we would be one of the 85%. We would be one of the 360 plus school districts that have already gone out to operational referendum, as opposed to the 15% that hasn't. Superior is a fiscally conservative school district that doesn't spend money just because it can spend money. It is not a district that knows it can go out to the community, a more affluent community, and know that their referendum is going to pass. We understand and we know we have to be responsible because everybody, there isn't a huge corporation out here. There isn't a huge tax base out here. We have to be responsible with the money we do have. And that's why we're part of the 15%.
Okay, so one of the questions that has been asked of me in the past is, so why don't we go bigger? And I think the biggest reason we don't go bigger is because of what the survey said. Our community really said, you know, we want to support something, but we want really the least expensive option available. And so what that means for us is that we'll be able to keep a status quo. We won't be adding things, we won't be adding programs, but it will help us maintain our current programming if that referendum is passed. Want to talk about this slide?
Yeah, so what would happen if we don't? Like I said, somebody's got to pay the price. If the operational referendum doesn't pass, it is going to be less opportunities for our kids. Class sizes are going to go up. Amy's video previously, all those programs that we offer to our students to get them set for post-graduation, to get them set. Spartan Manufacturing, all the autos classes, DECA, these are not required by the state. They're not mandatory by the state. Those are what we decided. We know this helps our kids. And we're going to take the money that we have, our limited amount of money, and invest it in the kids and invest in that program. Frankly, what it comes down to, if we only have this small amount of money and I need to buy math books and I can't buy something else for shop class, or I can't buy for DECA, then I can't spend it in that program anymore. It's going to be a reduction in opportunities for our kids. And not only just, you know, those courses like that, it's AP courses that set kids up when they go to college or to the tech school. I'm going to tell you, if you have anybody, kids, grandkids that go to high school and are thinking about going to any type of college, put them in those college courses that we provide here. Instead of paying, you know, $1,500 to send those kids for one course, one semester, do it here, and it's free because we as a district have invested in that. Those opportunities are going to be gone though. It is going to touch sports. Sports is a touchy thing, but if we don't have the money to pay for the things that are mandatory in the classroom, how can I justify paying for any of these extracurricular activities that aren't required? So.
Talk about the elementary school piece.
Oh yeah, and the elementary, sorry. So we closed down Lake Superior. Part of the closing down was Lake Superior, it's twofold. One, declining enrollment. Amy said we were able to close the school down, consolidate that, and we didn't increase the class sizes. That's about the only way that you can make a significant savings in a school district, is because 80% of our budget, 80% of our expenses are tied to salary and to benefits. We would have to look at closing another elementary school. It would have to be back on the table. And when I tell that to people a lot of times in town, they go, man, I feel bad for Four Corners. Yes, they're going to close. But what I tell them is, if you look at Four Corners, which is way out here, and then I got to get all those kids brought into town, or I just have 3 schools that just go boom, 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 right down 28th Street. Logistically, what's easier to do? Is it just shifting a couple kids this way, or is it pulling all those kids into town? Now, I'm not going to make that decision. Amy doesn't make that decision. It's going to be a community decision, but I think it's going to be something where it has to be talked about. What is the best thing that we can do for our kids? Because the only way to make that savings would be closing an elementary school, increasing class sizes this time because we can't take in a huge amount of additional kids. And then we would have to look at reducing the staff. So Oh, oh man,
You
I
wanna
got a
go-
lot today.
No, you have a lot to talk about. Do you want to go to the slide instead? Okay.
So, the number one question, I'll skip most of the part. People want to know what's this going to cost me? $7 per $100,000. So if you have a $200,000 home, that's $14 a year. They asked me what number do we use, because I know the city just did this huge reassessment, and all of a sudden my house went from being $130,000 to now my house is worth $190,000. Honestly, the state school district never really cared what your home was assessed at, because those numbers are always way off. City hadn't done a reassessment for like 15 years. The actual good number to use now, if you live in town, is look at what your new assessed value is and multiply that by $7, divided by 100,000, multiply it 7. So again, it's monthly. You're looking at, the average home in a Superior is about $200,000. So that first year, it's $1.16 a month. The second year, $1.16 a month. And then it goes up to $4.50 to $9 to $13.16 a month. That's the price it is. That's the price our property tax people would need to pay in order to keep all the opportunities that our students have going forward.
So I just want to reiterate what I said earlier today. So you can see in years 1, 2, and 3, that number is relatively low. It gets higher as we get up to years 4 and 5, and that's a direct result of that graph or that table he showed that talks about the deficit as we look in the future years.
Yep. And when people look at this, like, man, it doesn't seem like it's a lot of money. It's not. This is peanuts. Go out and look at all the other school districts who are going out for referendum, and those numbers are like $80 instead of $7. Ashland, I think, is like $79. If you go down to
$100,000 home.
for a $100,000 home, if you go down to Madison, they're talking about $300. The numbers are astronomical. In Superior, the numbers aren't that high. It has a lot to do with a tax base and everything else. But this is what it is. This is what the referendum would cost.
Right. So I just want to close and reiterate, not only am I an educator here in Superior, I'm a mom of a student here in Superior. I'm here because I want to be here. Some districts, there's a reason why the life expectancy of us, or not life expectancy, the life expectancy probably goes down too. But the life of a superintendent in a school district is about 3 years, because this is hard work to be able to get through this. But I'm completely convinced that we're going to be able to get through this and continue to have amazing programs for our kids. This is a great place for our kids to go to school. I'm super proud to be from Superior. I'm super proud that my daughter goes here, and we do really have an awesome school district and awesome families and awesome kids. So ultimately, the question that we're posing is, do you want us to continue going down this path that we've been going down for 7 years, knowing it's going to feel different moving into future years? Or do we want to make some changes like 85% of school districts across the state have considered? So I wish we weren't in this position. And regardless of what happens in the referendum, you can bet that we will be sitting in front of legislators for the next 6 months, telling our story and making sure that our story is heard in Madison. We do not need to be forgotten in Superior. We're on the map. People ask us questions, and I'm really proud of that. And so people want to know what's going on in Superior. We will continue to tell our story, because we need to be, we need our state revenue to be keeping up with the cost of doing business ultimately.
And so the other thing, the ask I have of you guys, if you guys came to this meeting and took the time out of your evening to come to this meeting, I'm pretty sure I got you already. I think you know how important public education is. What I'm asking is, we have around 30 people. If everybody just texts or emailed 5 to 10 people, all of a sudden we will go from 30 people to 300 people. This vote is going to be very tight. Only 60% of referendums passed in April, and this vote is going to be very tight. There is so much misinformation going out there. Please, I'm not telling you to call or text somebody and say, tell them to vote yes. Just give them the information so they know. It's $7 per $100,000, and there will be, there'll be consequences if it doesn't pass, because there's going to be opportunities that are taken away from our kids. So that's my big ask of you guys, is just reach out and let people be informed so they can make informed decisions.
I think 2 big data points that people need to understand is how much we get per student compared to other school districts in the state of Wisconsin. And the other thing that we are really proud of, our fiscal background in this school district. And when people say we've been irresponsible, I really feel that's a misrepresentation of the work that we've done, knowing that we have been saving money. We've been reducing expenses to the highest level we can, and building up that fund balance from about 21% to about 28%. And so we're really proud of those things, but I think those are important data points that people need to understand. Okay, so we've done a lot of talking. I know that I have 2 Boy Scouts back here who said they have questions for me tonight. So can I start with you guys?
Yes.
Okay, what questions do you have for
You
me?
can, I'll go first. Have you thought about other ways to get revenue other than asking house owners for more money?
Great question. We've written a lot of grants. The problem with grants is grants aren't sustainable. So like we said, 80% of our school district budget is in staffing. So if we were looking at maintaining staff, for example, with grants, those dollars run out after about 1, 2, 3, 4 years, depending on the length of the grant. And so those aren't sustainable dollars. Now, a lot of our grants, we go back and forth and go and get those renewed. But many grants, they try to get you off on the right foot, but they don't intend for those grants to be sustained over time. So I think that's one important way that we've tried to increase revenue. Another way, I don't know if you've noticed it, but we've gone in the last year, we have gone out to our community for naming rights and sponsorships. So our pool has been sponsored by Happy Tails Veterinary Clinic. They are donating a significant amount of money on an annual basis to help support our budget. NBC just donated a significant amount of money to us as well. And their naming rights are on the gymnasium. What is another couple of them, David, that we've engaged with over the? I know there's many, but can you give me a couple?
Essentia Health is in
Essentia, Synovus.
Synovus has also helped us out. They've done a massive donation for Spark Manufacturing. They're also one of our main scoreboard sponsorships.
So last year, for example, David helped us acquire about $300,000 that is used to help support our annual budget from just our community business partners who believe in supporting our school district. So we're very appreciative of that. And that's before the NBC donation that we received, which is a significant amount.
And the big one from NBC, they gave us a large donation. They wanted to sponsor our gym. Part of it is they wanted us to buy a huge scoreboard. David Coy has already worked to get sponsors where we are making revenue. That is now a revenue generating stream for us that was solely provided by a donation from it. So not only
they paid for the scoreboard, and now we have advertisers who on an annual basis contribute to that. So that is going to be, do you know about how much we'll make as that on an annual basis?
We've been signing groups for about 5-year deals for about $25,000 for those 5 years. We also have other tiers as well for about each year, maybe about $1,000, $2,000. So like pretty much any little bit helps. So even that alone, close to $100,000.
So going back to your question, I think there's 2 things. One, grants, I think is a big one, but I think another one has been our community partnerships and our sponsorship and naming rights, I think have been probably our biggest donations.
Those opportunities are still available too. So, if there's
Really
bounty that wants to do like the, I don't know, whatever media.
Performing Arts Center, yeah.
Or the Performing Arts Center, please just come reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to help.
You guys have some more questions? You have a list.
I have 5 questions.
Okay,
That's the third.
keep going, kiddo.
So why did you guys have to spend the money on Cooper when you have 5 other elementary schools to take care of, and you guys spent the money on that one, and now you're shutting down schools because of that decision?
Couple things. One is when Cooper was built, Cooper wasn't it wasn't an additional school. It was intended to replace an existing school that needed to be replaced. So Cooper was replacing that school. I think one thing that nobody planned on, and there are some former board members in the room too who were here when that happened before my time. We didn't know the pandemic was coming, and the pandemic did have some significant impacts on our enrollment. And we lost immediately 200 kiddos in 2020, and we never recouped that. And we've really seen the reduction, and we've really seen the reduction in our birth rates too. And so we did a demographic study in 2020, and the experts who did that study, they do it for a 10-year period of time. In that study, they indicated that we would see declining enrollment, but at a much, much smaller rate. And that was done prior to the pandemic. So I think the pandemic had some impacts. And I think if our folks knew now if they knew then what we know now, that might look different. Yeah. You have other questions, Say?
Which other school do you think you would shut down?
We don't know yet. That would have to be a community task force that would take a look at, and that's what we did in the last school consolidation process.
What profits do you think you would get from shutting down another school?
So like Mr. C said, the savings we get in closing a school isn't necessarily in the sale of the building. It is in the reduction of staff that would happen. And you want to talk through that?
So if you close a school, example, Lake Superior, we closed Lake Superior. They had 9 teachers, a principal, custodian, all their food service staff. All those positions were absorbed by other schools. So we didn't have to add anything, or we eliminated those positions, and that's how you get a significant savings off a school. And then you also have your utilities and things like that. But again, a vast majority of the savings is in that staffing that you've reduced. And not only have you reduced it, but you reduce it every year. So it's not just this year that we reduced, 15 staff members. It's 15 more the next year and the next year and the next year. So
That's where the savings comes in. Did we get through all of them? You got another?
I have 2 more. How much of this money will go to the current building maintenance for the older schools that need repairs?
Oh, good question. I'll let you answer that.
So if the operational referendum passes, we'll be able to go back and look at our long-range facilities plan. It kind of gives us the blueprint of there's projects that we're waiting on to make sure that those facilities are going to stay open long-term. Four Corners has significant amount of maintenance that needs to be done. Great Lakes and Bryant have significant amount of stuff that we need to get done with those schools to ensure that they're sustained. The biggest thing and the biggest issue with school finance is where is the easiest place to save some money? Okay, if I don't go and do the tuck point over at this school, I can save myself $600,000. Yeah, don't do that because that's super easy to just say no to that. But now that $600,000 tuck point costs $900,000 because you waited longer and all of a sudden your roof is leaking and you have foundation problems. That's where we're going to look at using that money to do the preventative maintenance that have been delayed because we don't have a budget to do it.
We have beautiful facilities, and so we want to make sure that we're responsible in the regular maintenance to make sure those are long lasting. Just 1 second. Did we get them all?
One more.
One more. Okay, one more, and I'll come back here.
Okay, so 2 more. If we don't get more money, would we have to get rid of sports? Like
We'll have to take a look at what activities we would have to remove. Yes. And I say activities in general because it's more than sports, yeah.
Okay, and last one.
Okay.
How do you demand changes about how we get more money from the state?
Well, my ask would be everybody in this room, a wide variety of stakeholders, kids, parents, and staff need to have a voice, and we need to tell our superior story. Like David showed that graph, the uncoupling of that happened. If that didn't happen and they would have kept up, we wouldn't be going to our taxpayers and having this impact on our community. And so I think we all have to have a voice in talking to our lawmakers about how important public school education funding is, because we know our kids are our future and it's important, right? All right, I'm gonna go over here because I saw your hand up first.
Doing the math, we're losing between 60 and 70 students a year. So at the end of the 5-year term, we're going to be losing between 200 and 350 students. It's inevitable for more schools will be building this, correct?
I don't think it's inevitable. I think it would be inevitable if the referendum doesn't pass because
Even if you have
Yeah.
referendum, you're going to state
yes,
that you're going to be losing students.
yes.
So would it make sense to keep another school open with 350 less kids in this district?
If it's more, at some point, if you do reduce the number of elementary students in particular, you would have to revisit that. Yes, you do need to revisit that.
So another part of that is, so when you're seeing decline in enrollment, like you said, all these numbers are dropping, but where they're dropping is on the 12th grade side. So you have 310 12th graders that graduate and you got 240 kindergartners. Well, that's been happening for a long time to the point that we've lost, 500 students in the last, at the elementary level. My hope, and I think it's going to happen, is it'll flat. So when we're bringing in the 240s, those are going to stay flat. So when we're seeing decline in enrollment, next year the middle school is going to have 50 less kids because they have a big 8th grade class going up to 9th grade and a small 5th grade class going to 6th grade. So when we see that drop in enrollment, like you said, it isn't going to hit just the elementary schools. Your elementaries will probably stay flat. That's why when cuts would need to take place, we We went at the elementary schools. They took a very hard cut this past year.
And have been actually for the last couple of years. Yeah.
Those smaller class sizes are now rolling up to the middle school. They're rolling up to the high school. That's where those next significant cuts are.
So in the next 5 years, I think our staffing reductions will be at the middle and at the high school because those low grades will now be moving up into those buildings where we've already made those adjustments at the elementary. But to your point, the long-term stability needs to be revisited based on what our overall population looks like, for sure.
And the thing I just want to clarify is this referendum passes doesn't mean we're not doing cuts. We're doing planned strategic cuts. We're dealing with attrition. We're not going to do a significant cut just because we ran out of money this year and have to do these class size jumps. It's like if we lose, 100 kids at the middle school over 3 years, over that time, we can cut a teacher in some position. The other part I also want to make clear is, because I've had it up, what if the state comes in and saves the day and gives us a boatload of money? Says, you know what? Public education has not been funded correctly. We are going to give you the amount of money you should have. We're going to get it so you're equal. We're going to put you at average. This operational referendum gives us the ability to levy up to that amount. It doesn't mean I have to levy up to that amount. My goal, my hope, and I know it's Amy's because she told me what my goal was going to be, and that's to make sure that if we don't have to, we don't levy to the max, that we don't max out you guys' taxes. If we don't need the $1 million, then we don't tax the $1 million. That's one thing that's a promise we have to make if this referendum is going to pass. Because on the other side of it, if the state doesn't fix this, we'll have to come back in 5 years and do this again. And if you guys
really one of the reasons why we haven't come to our community. I mean, this has been my biggest hesitation in coming out for an operational referendum is knowing, what do you do after that runs out, right? In year 5.
And there's so many variables that could take place. So a community could just be disenchanted with something because something happened. It's not even anything to do with the school. I had one of my best friends said when I originally talked to him, he said he's not going to vote for it. I said, why wouldn't you vote for this? You got 2 kids in the school. He goes, Dave, my taxes are going up. My utilities are going up. My wages aren't going up. This is the only thing I can say no to. This isn't the thing you want to say no to if you don't want your kids to be paying that price. So,
not that you're telling people.
No, and I am totally unbiased.
Right.
I would say it's that might be one. I have 2 kids, one of them just graduated, the other one's graduating, neither one stay here.
Yep.
They don't leave. And I'll give you this, our school district has been the best around here. I say this again, it's the state.
And historically, just speaking from,
What he said or summarize it, we can't hear it.
sure. He said he felt like the city was not providing incentives for young people to stay in Superior. And I will say historically, people do tend to come back to the community where they were raised. That is historically what happens. And we are lucky that we have so many wonderful post-secondary options for kids, technical colleges. It does help to maintain our students in this environment, but I can only control the K-12 environment right now. So that's what I'm doing. Yeah.
I'm going to the first question too. You mentioned that the student enrollment is going down, but then student class ratios would have to go. What does that mean? Like class sizes would go up, but there's less kids. What does that mean?
So the way that we do, the way that we allocate staffing is based on a ratio. So for example, right now we use a ratio of about 15 for kindergarten. So that means if I have 30 students in a kindergarten in one building, that means I need 2 kindergarten teachers. The ratio will go up in the future. So instead of having 15-to-1, maybe it goes up to 20-to-1. Or at the 3rd grade level, right now we're in the low 20s for a ratio for how we identify how many 3rd grade teachers we need. That might go up to 25 or 26 for a 3rd grade class. So when we say class sizes would go up, the ratio goes up for us to determine how many staff we need to allocate classroom teachers. And that's elementary and secondary.
That's been kind of leveling itself out to with teachers that's been only 200 kids instead of 300 kids coming in the first.
Correct. So that's how we've made some of those reductions that we showed where we're adding to our fund balance is the ratio's been the same, but because we have less kids at the elementary level, we've needed less elementary teachers. And so that's where we've made those reductions. And so the class sizes haven't gone up, but because the number of students have gone up, we need less staff. Does that answer your question?
But what would that change with our funding, like as far as we've got teachers and our ratios are still the same with the funding? How are
We don't get funding based on how many teachers we have. We get funding based on how many students we have.
Correct, and so our teachers go are based off ratios of how many students we have. So if we have less students, we should have less teachers.
Yep.
So then I'm just trying to figure out where.
Yep, so we do. So we let go of about 60 staff members. I would say about 30 of them.
About 26, I think, were
Six were teachers, vast majority elementary school. But pushing those kids out where, if, Miss Johnson was the teacher there and her kids she was laid off, her kids were pushed out to different schools. And all of a sudden they had, our ratio was 20 kids, let's say, and that class had 18. Well, you put 2 kids in there, it's still below our ratio. So that's where it comes in. As you make the savings with the teacher. So it's not a static number. So when you have a teacher that's making X amount of money, if we're going to keep up and, our teachers are some of the, most underpaid people that are out there for the job they're doing. We got to give them some type of increase. The increases we've been giving over, since COVID, we were looking at inflation. Everybody knows inflation. Inflation's been crazy at, 18% and all this other stuff, or 8%. Our raises that we're sending out are like at 2% or less than 2% because they're based off the base pay that somebody makes. So with that, that's why expenses go up. Everything is going up on the expense side. So as we reduce the teachers, and like you said, when we can reduce a teacher, that's around X amount of money that we've done reduce in expenses. So
there was a question over here earlier. Yeah.
You had used the word decoupling, and I didn't remember in the presentation what that referred to.
So revenue was coupled with inflation. So if inflation went up 2%, you got 2% more in revenue. That would have been huge back when we were, it's pretty much hyperinflation when you're seeing 8%, 6% inflation. During that time when we're seeing 8% and 6% inflation, the state gave us 0 because they said use that ESSER money instead. And
About that.
That he's not.
No, previous one.
Oh, I was like, okay, which one is that? There was a rumor that went that we fired a previous business manager and they put us in this position, and that's why we're going to referendum. That obviously didn't happen, and that's a very, very horrible rumor. No, David took on the role because our previous business manager took a position closer to her family. So
drove like an hour. And
yeah.
She's a lot.
You have a question?
Yes, I see debt service is about 9 million a year. How does that fit into the total? And where's that going? It looked like it had bumped up like $1 million over the last few years.
So the debt service is it's the referendum debt. So when we built Cooper and the high school, or remodeled the high school, that was a $90 million that we have to pay on our debt. So that's the equivalent of the mortgage. So
How do we compare with other school districts? It seems like a lot of debt service.
Good question.
I guess I don't.
Well, the big thing, or one thing I tell people is, like, people say, oh man, I can't believe you did that in 2016. One, we are lucky we did that in 2016 now, because we wouldn't have had a $90 million debt. We would have had 180.
The school today is far more expensive than it was in 2016.
So at the time, that was the highest capital referendum in the state of Wisconsin. Now it wouldn't even be It's not even top 5 for what the capital referendums that they're doing just this year alone. As far as how we compare in other districts, we're right on line, maybe a little less. I don't like to talk about our neighbor districts, but Maples has a significant, their debt ratio is higher. Again, it's because they built a high school. They don't have the tax base that we have. So that's
We're
where,
able to spread that across far more larger populations. So smaller communities that build a new high school or a new building, they incur costs at a much higher level on an individual basis.
so, and it's, I mean, even our mill rate, that's the number of people use as our mill rate. What is their mill rate? That's how much per $100,000, so, you know, per $10,000. Our mill rate this year is 624. Last year was 679, I believe.
What's the state average?
$7.70. So we're still going to be below the state average on what for the mill rate is. When you compare to local districts around us, even with an operational referendum passing, we're going to be right in line with what they are. And we're getting the benefits of the extra money coming into the district. So.
Other questions? Yeah.
I had a question about the property tax impact. Could you go back to that slide that you had up there?
Oops, this one right here.
I'm just looking like under the $100,000 level. So
Up here. This is monthly and this is annually.
or annually. So the first year, the district is requesting 2.5 million. And that would cost the taxpayer $7
For a $100,000 home.
per 100,000.
Yeah.
That's exactly the same for year 2. But then year 3, it goes up to 3.5 million, yet goes from 7 to 27. And then by the time you get to year 5, you're asking for 5.5 million. But it goes from $7 to $79. That's like over 11 times as much.
You want to talk through that?
Sure, you are the first one that's asked that question. So the reason that is because, like he was referring to our debt revenue or our debt that we have to pay. When you have the debt, that number is open. That's variable that you can increase the amount that you're going to levy on the debt side of it. We've always increased or paid more on our debt side. This past year, it saved us $972,000 is what we saved because of the way we manage our debt schedule. Going forward, though, we have to make a decision on what we're going to do. We can't do both. So in order to keep the doors open, in order to make salaries, we would have to focus on the operational side and actually let go of our debt levy strategy side. So then you would see a reduction. We wouldn't charge for the debt side that gives us the ability to reduce our interest payments or interest expense. And so that's why you're seeing the number go up like that.
Yes.
So you guys, with declining enrollment, you guys attributed that to lower birth rates? Do you guys attribute any of that to like COVID, the homeschooling?
I would say the one population of students that's grown in the state of Wisconsin has been the number of homeschool students. My understanding is population is going down amongst private schools statewide, public schools statewide. The only group that has increased has been homeschool students or students accessing virtual education. So one of the things our school board actually just talked about at a recent strategic planning meeting is, do we need to start thinking about potentially offering a charter school option within the school district of Superior that would provide virtual options to students outside of Superior to start to attract students from outside of Superior to address that revenue and that enrollment issue. So
Same rate in the state.
I think so. Yeah, so they'd become open enrolled in our school district.
Do you anticipate like, so homeschool students are elementary age now, if they were from COVID, do you anticipate them re-entering public school?
I think it depends on the family's choice. Yeah, I mean, I do think we see more students enroll into public school as they go into middle or high school.
Right.
We do see that. I know we usually get like a jump of about 50 kiddos at the high school every year that have come from other settings that now want to come to Superior High School.
And I think that's where we have to sell our opportunities. Like that video that we had out there, not only is that video to discuss what we got with the referendum, we want homeschool students to see that and be like, I'm going to go to school there, Mom. As far as open enrollment's been pretty flat. I know people think, you know, we're just bleeding kids out to all these other districts. What was it? we lost 98 kids to what I call a brick and mortar school. So that's going to be Maple and Solon because they're the only two that are really close, and 84 kids to online schools. But when you look at that number, that sounds like a big number until you know, I like to geek out on the numbers and see what the relationship is on it. We take more kids from Maple percentage wise than we give to Maple. We take a lot more from Solon percentage wise than we give to Solon. I mean, Solon honestly can't like us because when we take 10 kids from them on a small
Huge
school
impact.
district, that's $100,000 that we've taken from them and brought to us. So open enrollment is flattening out. Like Amy said, there's been discussion about the online schools, but part of
We
that.
do offer, I do want to say though, we do offer online opportunities for our high school kids to acquire credit, but it's only available to resident students. There's specific laws in the state of Wisconsin that if you want to offer virtual options to students outside your district, it has to be set up through this charter school type of model. So we'd have to inquire, we'd have to do that investigation, but we do offer that for our high school kids. Great question. All right, the time is 7 o'clock, so I want to honor people's time, but I will hang back if anybody wants any individual questions. I'll stay here. We do have an orchestra concert next door, so that's happening also. I do want to thank you for coming, being informed. If you have any questions between now and November 5th, feel free to call or send me an email, okay? Thanks for coming. What's that?
Any coffee?
I do have coffee and conversations. Nobody came to my last one, but I have 2 more next week. One's at Four Corners and one's at the board office. So if you have anything that you think of that you want a face-to-face conversation, I'll be available for those as well. Thanks, Taylor.
Feel free to email as well. Just let us know. And like I said,
As questions come up that we feel like everybody kind of needs to have that same information, we've been putting them on the FAQ for transparency purposes. So, okay, I'm going to hang back. Thank you for coming. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My first applause. This was fun.
One question for you.
Yeah.
I was just curious, what percent